Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doodles episode 18. I'm your host, Sapna Malhotra. Imagine you're a 3 or 4 year old kid. You walk into your classroom at school and you think to yourself, what do I want to study today? Do you want to start with math? Do I want to start with science? When you make up your mind, you go pick up the material that you want to study with and you sit down, and that's how your day starts. Isn't that a fantasy every child would love to have in their school life? In our past conversations in Desk Doodles, we've had thought leaders. We've talked about how we can bring down the stress levels for children. We've debated on the methodologies, the pedagogies, and I think the main thing, the fundamental thing that came out when we were talking to all the various guests that we had was that it is so important how that education or that knowledge is given to the children. If the knowledge that is imparted is loaded with fun, definitely the learning is fun for the children. Today on Desk Doodles, we have an amazing guest. She creates these exciting moments for her children day in and day out. She's been an educator for the past 18 years or so. She is the founder of the Montessori School, Bangalore. She is the executive director of the Institute of Montessori in Bangalore. Please welcome Ms.Kavya Chandrasekhar. Welcome to Desk Doodles, Kavya.
Thank you so much, Sapna, for that introduction. And it's lovely to be part of the Desk Doodles. And I look forward to interacting with you and sharing with you my journey so far with the children.
Absolutely. Looking forward to a conversation so much. But before we jump into that, Kavya, tell us about your exciting journey, how it started, where you are, how you reached there.
Sapna, my journey started by accident. Really, it started by accident. I was doing my graduate studies in commerce, and then as part of the marketing strategy, we were supposed to look at early childhood education in the city. So I went exploring that, understanding that. And when I was on that project with my peers and my mentor was supporting us on that project, I really discovered a lot about early childhood education. What was prevalent, what was an alternative school of thought. And that's when I started to really think about the way I got educated, because as part of the research we had to give a synopsis of alternative methods, and there were many methods, but few were very relevant in India. And when I started to think through that, it really touched something within me. It touched a memory of my childhood education, and I let it be. It just became a seed, you can say, that needed a lot of nourishing. And over a period of a time, when I got into post graduation, which was again into the corporate sector, which was more of public relations and advertising, I was consistently nurturing the seed at the back of my mind. And I wanted to explore and understand more about educating children, because in retrospect I was thinking about my own way of being educated. Somewhere it didn't leave me with a very good memory, and that's when I started to dive more into it. And when I was finishing up my post graduation, I had a choice to move into the corporate world, or I had the choice to really make a big switch, that's get into early childhood education. That's when I took a big leap of faith against all odds, because my family was prepared to see me in the corporate world. And then I went up to my father one fine day and I told him that, I'm reading this book by Montessori. It's called The Discovery of the Child and The Secret of Childhood. I'm reading both these books, and she seems to be saying something that seems to be impacting me. I had this conversation with him, and my father, is highly intelligent person, and he looked at me, he kind of tried to understand me, but failed miserably to understand me. And he said, "Are you trying to tell me that you're going to set up or look at options of taking care of young children, like changing their diapers? Is that what you want to do?" He asked me. And and in that minute, I was just like, oh, yeah, that's part of the work, but it's more than that too. And he was just struggling to understand why someone who was doing so well, in her studies, was making this, unintelligent choice, of working with young children. That was on his mind. And he literally said, I should stop thinking about it
Yeah.
and not make such decision. And then, but I stood my gun and I said, no, this is what I want to do. And voila, I took up the training here in Bangalore for 3 to 6. And then that was not enough. Then I went to the States and did my birth to three training. And then I did the 3 to 6 training all over again with AMI. And then I did the AMI 6 to 12 training in London. And it has not stopped. It has just not stopped since then. And with all of the trainings, I just discovered so much about myself. It was not just about reaching out to children.
Yeah.
I think it also helped me understand people in a better perspective. And from then on, it's been a joyous ride, of course, with a lot of challenges as well as great discoveries.
So
Yeah, this is how it happened.
after all your the training, so did you start your own thing right away, or did you work somewhere after that?
I worked in established Montessori school here in Bangalore for in the 3 to 6 space in the children's house. That's what we refer
Correct.
to that that age group. I worked in the children's house for about 4 years, and then I went to the United States, did my training under the birth to three, because I was very curious while I was working with the 3 to 6 that this child who walks in at 2.5 doesn't listens. I was just like,
Right.
wow, like you really needed a lot more different energy to work with children between the age group of 2.5 to maybe 3.2. And I was really curious to understand what's going on. They
Yeah.
were very different from the 3.5-year olds. And I felt as a person, and on deep reflection, I was not able to reach out to them as effectively as I was reaching out to the 3 plus. And then I said, there's a switch. Some switch happens around that age that they, seem to be functioning very differently. And then I got to know birth to three training was not available in India then. And I heard a lot about the Montessori Institute Denver, which was, directed by Judy Orion. And at that time, Carrie Lawrence was assisting the course over there. And I did my research, and they said that, if you're thinking about birth to three, you should go there.
Right.
So I was, I think, I was in my fourth year or fifth year of marriage. And then I went up to my husband and I said, I want to do this. And he just looked at me and said, are you sure? I said, yes, I'm very sure I want to do this. And
Good.
then I packed my bags and went to the US, stayed there and did the course. And it was the most life changing experience I had, because I came in touch with a group of educators that were thinking, breathing, and questioning everything about young children under 3 years, which I feel like, most of the time we think we need to physically care.
Yeah.
That's where most of the energies goes,
Yes.
because
Yes.
that's what the schedule is like. You can't do anything about it. You need to think about, are they eating well? Are they sleeping well? Have they had their had their bowel movements, and if they had past urine? So most of the energy goes there. And but then, when I went to the course, I started to realize that there's much more than that. There's much more than physical care is important, but also one aspect that touched the core in me was how we as adults, or anyone who comes in touch with the child, kind of like, is with them, because you can't teach them. They just absorb everything around them. And that was highly transformative for me, because that meant that I needed to reflect, who am I needed to reflect first, who am I, rather than thinking about what am I going to do with this young child.
Yeah.
It required a deep introspection in terms of, how am I going to talk to this child? How am I going to care for this child? How am I going to accept this child 100% so that the child feels I'm in a safe place?
Yeah.
As soon as they're born, the first thing that they need to feel is, I'm in a safe place where my needs are going to be met. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the birth of the, birth to three work. Yeah.
Great, great, Kavya. I think it's admirable, and the passion is just flowing. And let's move from there. And I'm going to put the big question to you. And the big question is, what do you think that is Montessori just another way of teaching, or is it like a philosophy? It's like an ideology, and why do you think so?
Sapna, for this, for this question, I'm going to read out something from Montessori herself, and I think nothing answers this most eloquently than this thing, this particular writing by Montessori's son, Mario M. Montessori.
Yeah.
I'm reading from the Human Tendencies and Montessori Education. It is a small little booklet, and and Mario writes, Dr. Montessori's educational aims were on the one side to help the development of the child and on the other to help him adapt himself to the physical conditions of his environment and to the social requirements dictated by the way of life of the group of people among whom he lived. So, this was really the aim.
Yeah.
The aim was to be able to aid a development and make sure that we know what children need at each stage of development, not in isolation. She didn't talk about this development in isolation. She spoke about this development in tune with the social needs of the group where he was. So it meant anywhere. It can be a small little town, city, village, community, a tribal community. Her aim was very clear. She was very, very clear. We want to aid development such that that development is in tune with the social conditions of wherever the child is.
Yeah. And that is, I think that is the very essence that you brought out by that reading, Kavya, that I think Montessori is such a comprehensive, very child centric philosophy of education. It is absolutely deep rooted into developmental psychology, right from, I think, from the thought itself that the child walks into the environment and he thinks, what do I want to do today? Right. And it's right from that first step into the environment, and then the whole process of his learning is I think the whole system, it just stimulates that desire to learn, right, which all of us sometimes cannot inculcate in our entire life. And that child is made to walk that path from there on, thinking that, okay, what do I want to learn, right? That is so beautiful. I think that's the most wonderful part of a Montessori education.
Yes, Sapna, and that is a reality because Montessori was very clear that she didn't want an education plan that is predetermined. She was very clear that the needs of the child from birth to 3 are different from the child of 3 to 6, are different from the needs of the child in the 6 to 12, and are also different from the needs of the adolescent or the adult who is going to be formed in the 12 to 18. So she was very clear you can't have the same plan of education implemented from birth to 18 or to 24 because this child is changing. What the child needs at birth to 3 is very different from 3 to 6. So she wanted us to deeply question why are we preparing the same, which looks exactly the same, even though this child is changing? What is it about us that makes us prepare spaces which is exactly the same? It's the four walls with the tables, with the chairs, and with the blackboard, and we call that as a learning space. So we need to ask ourselves, isn't the child changing? And when movement is such a big part of development, and we are
That.
ensuring that they get seated on a chair for long periods of time, where is the learning happening? Can learning really happen? Or is the adult population falsely believing or falsely living in a security of yes, education is taking place? This is something that I think all of us need to question. Why is it that what she said maybe 100 years ago we have not been able to think through and bring about a change?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we all need to become strong Montessori environments. That's not my propagation. My idea is for all of us to just think,
Correct.
watch this child, and then take from the child what she needs and create the space to meet those needs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And also, I think the angle that you brought in, Kavya, earlier about the social environment, the people around, that is also a very, very essential part of Montessori education. That I think the entire family needs to be on the same page, needs to believe in that system, that philosophy. Because if the child is learning in a way that is very independent, the Montessori way makes that child think, what do I want to do? How do I want to do? And if that philosophy doesn't resonate in his lifestyle at home, that I feel then there might be some discrepancies there in that learning, right?
Yes, when families and learning spaces, it can be a school or it can be a learning center or it can be any space, because Montessori is not something that can be kind of like, be said that can be applied only in school. You can apply it to your way of life.
Yes.
And if you're providing opportunities for art, you can apply it over there. If you're providing opportunities for sports, you can apply Montessori philosophy. If you're providing opportunities for technical skills, Montessori can be applied. And you know what, I want to bring this point. AMI, which is Association Montessori International, which is the governing body which Maria Montessori started herself, is also working with dementia, like with elderly people with dementia, and applying Montessori philosophy. So Montessori is not just for education of children. It's a philosophy of life, which means aiding development, providing opportunities for social adaptability to anyone and everyone. In any field of life, this can be applied. So when you have environments, let's say when you're talking about a home environment of the child and the learning space of the child, reflecting the same ethos or the same belief, which means that I want as a parent for my child to be in a space where he is or who she is nurtured, and the learning space also believes in it. Of course, joint effort brings about a lot more for the child. And what we want for children, I think, both as educators as well as parents, is we all know children are born with potential, and we really want that potential to have opportunities to develop to a full capacity. And we don't know what the full capacity is,
Yeah.
and can be marveled by that full capacity
Yeah.
is what we really want to provide.
And
And
I
yes,
think that's
when
where
people work together, I'm not.
correct. That's where the paths
Yeah,
that
please go ahead.
no, I mean, I was just adding to that, that's where I think the beauty of Montessori education is, that the path that the children start walking is built with all those kind of opportunities for the children, and for them to experience it, for them to delve within and find their capacity, find their capabilities and the talents that are there hidden, and they need to discover it themselves also. That's what the education and enables them to do.
Yes, that's what it enables them to do. And the most important, adding to that, one of the other important factors is like, conventionally or mostly, we think that education is done to the child, in the sense that, the teacher teaches the child. But, if we step back and look at it, that kind of teaching is very limiting, where the teaching is done to the child. Learning and experiencing is a child's ongoing process. All that we as educators and parents, even parents, can do is to provide a space where they can work at the pace that they want to, and they can learn by themselves. It's a very self education. It's you learn when you work on yourself by yourself. That I think is very important, and somehow I feel sometimes we miss this point. And also, one other thing that Montessori philosophy or Montessori way of living or way of educating garners a lot of criticism around is, with the materials. Everyone thinks that Montessori means that you have to buy all these materials and put it out in the learning space, because what you were mentioning earlier, they choose what they want to choose. Yes, they choose what they want to choose, and they learn at the pace that they want to learn. But those materials, or whatever you call it, those activities that you put out either in your home or in your in the school environments, the Montessori environments, or in any other creative expression is only one part of the big picture. It's
Yes.
really a very, very
Yeah.
one part of the big picture. Montessori does not necessarily always mean equivalent to materials. Of course, yes, the materials are fantastic. But it's very important for all of us to remember that those scientifically prepared materials form a big part of the Montessori learning space. Having said that, that is not the only aspect of a Montessori environment. It's one part of the physical aspect, but the human environment or the human attitude forms a big part of the Montessori learning space, be it at home or any other space where the child has access to, which reflects the ethos of the Montessori way of life. Yeah.
But Kavya, coming back to the material part of it, I think it's a beautiful material that you have, whether it is the practical life material or for the culture or for the language for that matter. Each and every material that you use for the education is also just a way of making that child experience while he learns. That's what it is, right? That kind of material is, we classify it as Montessori material, but there are so many examples there in real life which can be used to educate children for them to experience it and learn, right? Instead of like in a general, conventional, mainstream school, the way the knowledge is spoon fed to children. Like there's a
Hmm.
particular system that you need to give it to the children, and the children need to absorb it. But in this case, the children are figuring it out themselves. They're kind of understanding it, and then so that kind of knowledge is always permanent, it is always there forever.
Yes, Sapna, I kind of agree with you, and it is true. These materials are very scientifically prepared and they're self-correcting. So
Yeah.
it takes away the adult from interfering and saying you're right or wrong, because children, through their own manipulation, realize that they've made an error and they have to correct it by themselves. I think what level of dignity, what level of self-respect, when we are all in spaces where someone else is not pointing out to us, you made an error, you need to correct it.
Correct.
But the self-correction happens very naturally as a possibility of manipulation.
Yes.
It's just like you take water in a jug and pour it into a glass, and the child might be pouring it and it's all flowing out, and the child knows, yeah, this is happening, this is part of my, it's a consequence of my action.
Yeah.
I didn't stop when I needed to stop and it's all pouring out, so I'm going to go and rectify it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, coming to the next question from there itself, because when children who learn in such a wonderful, I think it's a fantasy like world that they learn in, and when they move maybe at a primary level or they move at an elementary level, when they move to a mainstream school and they get into a classroom where there are desks and when the movement is restricted, all about what we talked about, how do they adapt to that then? Because sometimes it becomes inevitable for the parent to move that child if they move to a place where they don't have a great Montessori school. So then how do the children then they must be confused, or how do they adapt to it then?
See, one thing that I have experienced with our own children also, like, the Montessori school as the program for young children that's under 3 years. And we have a program for the 3 to 6 and the 6 to 12. So some of our children stay back and continue in the 6 to 12. Some of our children leave. One thing we tell parents and we kind of prepare them is, in a 3 to 6 space, they're moving about exactly like what you said, Sapna. They're choosing things that they want to work with. They work with it as long as they want to, and we're constantly observing all of those. But gradually also, some of the things that I want to bring out here is, when a child at 2.5 comes into the environment, he might be sitting with something maybe for 3 minutes or 4 minutes, but as they progress in age, as they progress in development, they also take on to activities where they have to sit. There's some work in the Montessori, not some, a big part of work in the Montessori environment, where they have to sit and work at something for 40 minutes or 35 minutes. That's just the nature of the work. Okay. So when you look at that, I think they have the needed preparation to sit at something for stretch period of time. Definitely yes. But in between work, they also have the freedom to move. The only thing that you need to talk to them about and to the families is the idea of sitting at a desk and being take to be able to take instructions from an adult when they can get up and when they leave. So that kind of like preparation is what you need to offer them. I'm not what's the right word to say, kind of like, I'm not a big believer that you need, in the fact that you need to restrict movement
Yeah.
to be able to aid learning, because I question that form of learning. But having said that, if parents and families are making a choice to move to a format where children have to contain themselves in a certain way,
Right.
which sometimes might be against their developmental
Correct.
needs,
Yeah.
they cope with it, they adapt with it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they also, some of the feedback that I've got from parents is like, when they used to come to the school, they used to be so excited to learn about things. They used to have this fire in their eyes. And now they move to a traditional school, and they say the first thing, the first 2 to 3 months they take to adapt, but they all adapt beautifully. But one thing that parents have come back to me and said is, they've started to say, I don't need to know this. I need to know only this, because this is what my teacher wants.
Oh.
You know
It's, yeah.
that becomes their
I know.
way, and they adapt to that.
Correct.
you know
And I think
I
other.
feel it's the parents who take,
Sorry.
in my experience, I feel it's the parents who take a longer time to adapt, because they're so used to children moving and learning, and then now they have to see the child who's asked to sit in one place and take
Correct.
instructions. But I'm also seeing a lot of schools which are like a hybrid, where
Yeah.
they're beginning to realize that movement is needed, and they're not as conventional as it was few years ago. And I'm thankful to that, and I'm very thankful that education as such, especially I know in Bangalore, like,
Yeah.
even though there are traditional school, they are providing needed movement opportunities, is what I think, and I hope, like what I've heard a little bit. Yeah.
I know. No, I remember because when I was teaching, and I was teaching in a conventional, traditional school, and in between, I was teaching kindergarten, and I used to take time in between when I would have time. I would go to the Montessori environments and just stand and observe. And I think it's just such a delight to see the children, the way they are excited to learn. And I mean, it's really hard to believe for people who have not observed it to understand it, because it is just amazing how children enjoy that kind of learning. And one other thing that I used to love about looking into the Montessori environment was that different age group children studying together, right? You had in the same environment, you have a 2.5 year old and you have a 5 year old, and the beauty of it was so striking, that how children learn from the very beginning stages how to help each other, how to be a mentor to the little one. So I think that that's again a very wonderful part of Montessori education.
Yes, it is. And, in which part of life are people living age wise other than in school? So Montessori was very clear. Like, our goal for education was nurturing development and the adaptability. And she said for both of these to happen, they should live like the way you and I live, right? In our home, we have people of different age group coming together. And, what we are, mostly seeing now is the impact of the industrial revolution, which is a batch-wise production of things, assembly line production of things. And that model of education came in at that time because women were going to work, and they will work at long periods of time. It was just a lot more easier to divide children age-wise and put them age-wise. But when you really look at development, you can question that. If development needs to reflect life,
Yeah.
then none of us would be developing to our maximum capacity today. I'm of a different age, you're of a different age. Look at the interaction and the discussion that we are having. We come from different cultural backgrounds, and we can come together and communicate. And this is what we want for children to hone and nurture, isn't it? And
Correct.
all the things that you said, I agree with it. I believe in it, and I've seen it to such great amount of they're like great things for children to absorb
Yeah.
during the 3 to 6 phase. And in the 6 to 12, It is, I wish you can come sometime down to watch the 6 to 12 space. It's
Definitely.
phenomenal to see the
Absolutely.
12-year-olds work with the 6-year-olds. Yeah, and it's also wider range, right? The 6 to 12, while some learning spaces break it down into 6 to 9 and 9 to 12. At the Montessori school, we have tried to keep it 6 to 12 because I feel there's so much of learning that
But coming
children
from
can
there
gain
to
from
coming
wide.
from the children to the teachers, how do you as a teacher, like if you're in 3 to 6 age group, how do you balance your time with each and every child? Because the little ones, I'm sure, would want to hog on to the entire time with the teacher because they all want to, come cuddle and sit next to the teacher, hold the hand. Like that's such an, part of that tiny age. So how do you divide your time and balance it between them?
See, to be a very successful or efficient educator, especially in a creative learning space like a Montessori environment, you really need to be super well organized. You need to be almost like a high functioning manager, efficient manager. That is what I would say would bring a lot of joy to you, and also do progressive work with children. I also want to say something over here, Sapna. I feel this work with children, either be with children under 3 or 3 to 6 or 6 to 12, you need to really think about it and make a choice whether you want to be an educator in a Montessori learning space, because it is going to demand a lot out of you, both physically, emotionally. It's going to ask a lot out of you. Initially, when you finish the training and when you join the classroom, you feel like every day is a tornado, and that's the truth of this job. You feel like every day is a tornado. But if you have faith in children, and if you know the principles of the method of education, and you are making bi monthly plans, and probability plans, lesson probability plans, if you're tracking observation, and if you're tracking every child and the entire community as a whole,
Yeah,
your work only gets easy. It
absolutely.
requires a deep commitment from the educator to commit to this kind of paperwork. Montessori, many a times Montessori is seen as you come, harvest palak, make palak soup or a lettuce salad and go home. Yeah, that's lovely, that's great. But over and above that, there is also a rigor, for the educator. The educator needs to be highly professional. She needs to have a deep understanding of young children, and she needs to hold faith in the child, that the child, in a space that I have prepared, will blossom to his fullest potential. And that cannot happen by just turning up every morning and
Yeah,
doing as you wish. No, it doesn't happen. I want to make this very clear, because many a times Montessori is seen as, you just walk in and the children will work. No, it doesn't. It
I think
doesn't
that's true,
unfold.
Kavya. I think that's true for uh, as an educator in I feel in any environment, because if you are committed to the children, if you are, I think as an educator, you are sleeping, eating, drinking, the thought process that goes through a child's mind. And if you want to give a little bit of freedom to the children, that's why I feel that half the time the conventional schools do not give that movement freedom in the classrooms, is because the teachers feel that once we give that freedom, we don't have class control, which is so wrong. Because I think it's all about the faith that you talk about between you and the children. And if you bring in experiential learning, if you bring in, because I've been a teacher for more than 15, 17 years now, and all through my life I always allowed a lot of fun, a lot of movement, and all that in my class. But it was never that, if you instill that kind of faith, I think it is so much easier for you to work with children, no matter what the way of teaching could be, whether it is a
Yes.
Montessori or a conventional.
Yeah. I bring this point out. One big aspect of Montessori is also observation. You make all these plans, but you're constantly observing, which I feel is very different in a 3 to 6 environment. You're tracking every child by the time. Okay, 9 o'clock he came in. What did he choose?
Correct.
Did he do that work independently? Was it directed choice? Was it, a choice that the child made because a friend of his made? They wanted to work
Yeah.
together. And then you make observations on, did they show concentration in the choice that they made? Or was it just a fluttering interest? She's painting, even I want to paint. She's doing a puzzle work, even I want to do a puzzle work. Or was it a choice that they said, oh, I walked in and I want to do today
Yeah.
decimal operations, and then you make note of all of those observations. And that is an important investment for you as an educator to understand not just individual children, but the community as a whole. Because Montessori environment needs to make some exceptions too, to reach out to children who need that additional help or support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect place for me to move into the next question, and which was coming to that. You don't, in Montessori education, you don't have like tests, you don't have exams, and that's again, for me, I mean, that's again a highlight for education, because you're not studying just to put it out on paper. You're studying and you're learning to learn something. That is the kind of philosophy that you're inculcating in the children, which is so beautiful. But from there, how do you, as a teacher or as a school or as a parent, how do you understand the progress of the child? How do you, because a lot of parents have felt like, we're talking about in general. Of course, there are parents who do understand the philosophy, who know, and they know that what it is all about. But certain parents will be like, oh, nothing comes home, so we don't really know what is happening. That's a very common way of how Montessori, a lot of Montessori parents put that. So how do you make them understand that progress?
Um, One of the key aspects is to, yes, we don't do testing in the traditional format at
That's
all.
great. That's great.
We don't do, but one of the kind of like misinformation that many educators have, or educators and even parents have around Montessori is, we may not test in the traditional sense, but there are some very interesting lessons that Montessori kind of like built into the and built into the
Curriculum.
inner philosophy and pedagogy, that involves checking. It's like a check system. I'll give you one example. Instead of introducing names of anything in the environment, she, along with she took this idea, I think, from Freud, but I'm not sure. This idea of the 3 period lesson, where you give the name first and then you ask them to keep it here, keep it there. Let's say they're having apple, banana, and orange. Give me apple, give me banana, give me orange, keep apple, keep banana. Eventually, you are asking, what is this? What is this? What is this? And testing as such, for us is more of a check or observation. I would like to convert testing and check is equal to observation into a Montessori environment, because if you're maintaining detailed records, which really you get skilled at as you gain experience in a Montessori environment, you know where children are making errors. Okay, so you make note of that error, and then you come up with a strategy to help them overcome that error. So you are checking, you have to kind of like keep a close look on where they need help, where they're facing difficulties, because that is also Montessori, to help children overcome those hurdles, overcome those obstacles. It might be as simple as like I've seen this very young children in our under 3 program. They bring water, they pour it into the basin, they take the soap and they're just rubbing the soap, and then there is no lather. They're just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And so, you want them to have that experience to realize that,
What is it?
well,
Yeah.
nothing is happening, nothing is happening. And we watch for like maybe 10 minutes or maybe 8 minutes, and we see what can happen. Can another child come in and say something? That is would be ideal.
Yeah.
Okay. Or the child discovers by himself. That is also great. And then, maybe after, he's had enough experience with that, and you feel like you may have to step in,
Yeah.
you will step in and say, okay, let's do this, let's wet our hands and then apply soap. I'm giving you a very basic
Yeah.
simple example, but this holds ground everywhere. Yeah.
Correct, correct. And I think that's the most important thing that I gathered from what you said was that when a child goes through that kind of a journey, he himself is assessing himself that, this is what I learned. If you talk to children, they will themselves say that this is what I've learned, but I didn't get this, but tomorrow I'm going to go back and do this. And I think this kind of learning, even as adults, we sometimes, when we delve in, we are unable to understand ourselves that, okay, and to come, I think comprehend that this is what I've not understood is so difficult. But teaching children in this way is creating a kind of a generation which kind of understands that, okay, I need to go back and I need to learn this. So I think what more do we want when a child himself or herself understands what I've learned and what I've not learned and what I want to learn. That is the beauty of, I think, that system of education.
Yeah. So we want to be able to give, like, what you said, I want to add to that and say you want to really be able to give time
Yeah,
for self discovery,
correct.
to for them to also make errors
Yeah,
and understand that we are friendly with errors. Through errors, I feel you learn a lot more than you would with always getting it right.
correct.
And that's the reason it's hard. I must say, like, when I started off my career with young children, I still remember, I'd gone with this idealistic idea that you follow the child, because in Montessori we all say that, right? Follow the child. And then I said, you follow the child. Like, if the child wants to do, he will do. If the child doesn't want to do, he will not do. So I remember this child, it's taken this this cabinet with geometrical shapes, okay? And then you were supposed to feel it, manipulate it, like put it back. Like, it's like a puzzle thing, you need to put it back. He did one or two, he got up and he walked away. And I said, he'll come back. You need to just follow the child. Maybe he's taken a break, he'll come back, kind of a thing. He never came back. He never came back. And I was like, that sitting, and I'm like, follow the child, he'll come back. Follow the child, he'll come back. And then, through experience, I realized that, yeah, you follow children when they're meeting their needs in the environment, when they're not just kind of like, there is freedom and there is limits. But he also has this I understood over time, that he's taken this work, he's done it a little bit, he's gone away somewhere, and I'm thinking he's going to come back 30 minutes, 45 minutes, he's not come back. And then eventually I realized through experience there comes a time when I have to get up and say, come on, let's come back and finish this and put it back and then go
Yeah,
to the next. And then, so this idea of, like, following children to meet the needs, and then preparing a space where the needs are met, and they understand the freedom, but they also understand that within the space there are limits, such that it keeps me safe, it keeps others safe,
yeah,
and it puts me on a path of progressing towards independence is very important.
correct.
And that's another checks, Sapna, are you able to aid children towards independence?
Yeah,
If a 2.5-year-old child, when he came to you, you've not been able to aid his independence and he's still at the same spot at 3.5, 4.5, then it's a big problem.
yeah,
It's a huge, big problem. So
right.
you want to ask yourself, as an educator, are you able to aid independence? Yeah.
No, that's wonderful, Kavya, because I think what you said was so correct. That, but in the example that you gave also, the beauty of it was that you're not forcing the child to learn it right away. You gave that child that little freedom
Mm.
to think, to maybe just go explore something else, because that environment is something that he's going to explore slowly. And then when you
Mm.
just, you're just brushing it, that why don't you come back and finish it and put it back, you're still giving him a choice. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, that is the beauty of it. Whereas when you're in a conventional school, there is absolutely no freedom at all. It's all a formatted thing that you study English, then math, then science, and then you maybe step out to the art room. So I think what you said, that a hybrid model where the educator also needs to believe that it's okay to give some freedom, it's okay to guide the child, but not always force that kind of a system and education. down their throats like that.
Yes, I think that's very important. Like, I think learning is a lot more enjoyable and the learning is a lot more meaningful
Correct.
without restriction on movement. I
Absolutely.
feel like, when we ask children to restrict movement, I feel we're really touching upon or restricting basic human rights.
Yeah.
Movement is such an integral part. And when you're telling them you need to arrest your movement, I feel you're infringing on their basic. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, when we were talking about the material, Kavya, so last year, 2020, I had so many conversations with students and principals and teachers and everybody, and I think it was difficult for each and every stakeholder on so many different levels. But as a Montessori teacher, as you have your own school, how difficult was it for you to reach your children? Or yeah, I'm sure because like we said, the material is only in, it's one part of the learning, but it is also an important part of their learning, and that is only in school. They individually, they don't have. So how were you able to, get across to your children on this online platform?
That's a question. We spent a lot of time ideating and thinking. I have a lovely team which is highly invested in Montessori education, and we also receive a lot of mentorship. From people who have been in this work for a long period of time. And when the pandemic began, we were all completely shaken. We didn't know how we are going to navigate through this time. And then, but what we did was to talk to parents, saying that, initially all of us thought 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and then it got extended and extended. So we talked to parents and we talked to our mentors, and we said, and all of them said that, especially our mentors said that, in many, many years, generations have not been in this kind of a situation. Though Montessori survived 2 world wars, how are we going to navigate through this time? And what really helped us was to really educate parents. It was like, one of my team members said, this COVID has a lot of silver lining. And we really used this time to be able to educate our parent community, which you do through your school year. But this time we had this all this time to educate them on the ethos of Montessori principles. Like, what conversation I'm having with you, Sapna, is the conversation we had with our parent community. And of course, yes, some we did have mixed reaction from the parent community. But when you're very clear about the ethos of the Montessori principle, why you're going to do certain things, why you're not going to do certain things, and then you are convinced about it and you communicate it effectively to the parent community. If not today, they come around it gradually, because I think both educators and parents want children to be developing. So if that is the focus, okay, if that's the focus, then I think you can come together to look at ways in which we can sustain development. Yes, children can't be in the learning space, they're going to be at home. So who's the best support system? It's going to be the parents. But the biggest challenge was parents were also working from home,
Yeah.
around this time. They also had to educate they also had to educate their child, during this time.
Yeah.
So what we did offer was a lot of workshops for parents. Like, we had workshop on key ideas, simple things like, okay, you have a home, can you create a small little space for children to do things at their own pace? You know, where they can do things, when they want to do and how long they want to do. Can you offer that kind of a space? And that space can have things that children enjoy. Maybe for a child from 3 to 6, it might be magnetic tiles. For a child from 6 to 12, it might be a stationery with paper, pencils, markers, colored papers, because they love exploring any idea that they think about. They want to create big projects. So can you make a space available for big projects? And for the 3 to 6 child, it was more like, can you engage them in the kitchen? Can they do something where they're contributing to your life? Can they set the table? Can they do all of that work?
Right.
And as the pandemic started to stretch, we, I think, as a team, discussed key learning links. See, you can't make the home a Montessori school. You can't make it a Montessori environment, because these are all scientifically prepared materials and there is a certain way to offer them to children. But then, as a team, we identified key learning links and we said this is what children need for learning to sustain. And these key learning links were around language. Do they have opportunities to enrich their vocabulary, read books, all of that? And it was around, do they have opportunities for movement? Think about that. And do they have opportunities for, yes, COVID is a reality, but they can have small groups of social interaction, maybe with their immediate cousins or
Correct.
nieces, nephews, and they all come together. And can they have that? So we focused on movement, language, and social interaction. One thing which we were very clear about is cognitive skills will take precedence over social skills. Social, emotional is what is going to be at the top, and whenever the conditions are right and children are back, we'll pick them up. We told the parents very clearly, we'll pick them up from wherever they are, and you need to trust us.
Yeah.
And that kind of really helped the parents to come together and kind of trust us. It took time. Each family took time. Some of them wanted us to prepare every material and send home, which we kind of said no to, because it's a easy way to get that. Yeah. And how are you going to send? And then our question is, I want all of us to ask this question. Yes, we can prepare a pink tower and send it home, but is material meant for teaching? The learning is in a social context. The learning really happens in a social context, and we have to be very mindful of that. And every parent took some time to get their sapna, but I feel if you're very clear about why you're doing this work,
Correct.
and you're not trying to link it and say, okay, you're a parent at the Montessori school, we need to kind of please you, we will do everything. I feel you're not
No.
development, you're
No,
just not going.
and you rightly said, Kavya, when earlier also we broached that point that the house is full of things that can be used to teach children whatever topic that we want to, and they can experience and learn. Of course, Montessori material is great, but like you said, you can substitute it in so many ways. The kitchen is there, your living room is there. There is so much that children can you can learn from. So I'm sure that what you said is amazing, that parents finally found saw light to it and they could understand that.
Yeah, yeah, not all of them, but I think most of them understood where we are coming from, and then they understood our commitment is to development.
Correct.
We were very very clear that our commitment is to development. And then if you are entrusting us with your child, whenever the child is back, we will take them from where he or she is.
Yeah, Kavya, I think what we talked about was bringing out the whole essence of Montessori education, and from where we started, that it is really not just another way of learning, but it is also a philosophy for life. It is so much more than just an
Yeah.
education system, right?
Yes, yes, Sapna. That's something that even I kind of to be very honest with you, I discovered gradually. When I first did my training for the 3 to 6, I thought, wow, such a lovely way of educating children. But then gradually over the years, I've come to realize that it's much more. Also very honestly, I want to say this, that this is where I am in terms of understanding what Montessori is today.
Yeah.
I know for a fact it's an ongoing journey for me and for all of the educators who are invested in Montessori, understanding Montessori philosophy. And, this is how I feel today, but I know for a fact I might have a different expression of it
Yeah.
maybe a year from now or 2 years from now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And let's hope that this time changes, and your children can come back to the beautiful environments, and they can run around and they can explore on their own, which is the beauty of Montessori education. So hoping that that time comes soon, and wishing you all the best with all the amazing efforts that you're taking to keep up with the education for all your children there. And all the best, Kavya. Has been a delight to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Sapna. I also want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. I think that this gave me a platform to talk a lot about Montessori philosophy for life, and some of the questions that you asked were also so pertinent to the situation that we are in. And also, I think what I really enjoyed was expanding this idea about Montessori, for life.
No, I
The learning
totally,
is for life.
I know, absolutely.
Life.
Yeah, if I could go back, be a kid, and start my learning all over again, I would seriously love to study in a Mont environment and experience it for myself because I think it is such a wonderful way of learning.
Yes, that's always what I think too. Every time I see children learning in that space, I'm like, we are creating this. When are we going to be in it?
Absolutely,
We want to be in it.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
let the creativity not stop. As an educator, let's keep creating these wonderful environments for children to learn, and that's all I wish for. So thank you so much today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sapna. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.